You've been hiking all day. You're tired. You need to make camp. It's cold and it's been raining. Yuck. You need to build a fire. How do you do it? And that's what we're going to be learning today. So let's get started. Welcome to the Adventure Travel Show podcast. I'm your host, Kit Parks, and today we're going to learn a critical skill that you need to make sure you know how to do before you go into the woods. To begin with, there are 4 parts to build a fire. The first thing we need to collect is something called tinder. Tinder is the small, easily ignitable stuff that burns right away. These will be like wood shavings, dryer lint, wax, wadded up paper, strips of cardboard, fire sticks, pine straw, pine cones, leaves, birch bark, etc. You're going to need to collect a nice big pile of these materials, about a foot wide of these materials. This is what you're going to use to catch that flame for a quick start fire. The second thing is the next step up in size. This is called kindling. And I apologize for my nasaliness. I've got a terrible cold, but this episode's due to come out. So nasally or not, off we go. Anyway, so sorry about that. So the second thing, like I said, is kindling. And this is larger than the tinder. You're talking about twigs like 1/8 of an inch to 1/2 of an inch in diameter. You want to collect a nice pile of these as well. Next, your firewood. These are the logs that you're actually going to burn. So these are going to be your branches and smaller logs up to 5 inches in diameter. Do not break off green branches from trees. Not only is that unethical to do, they don't burn very easily. You want to use fallen and dead, preferably dry branches. We're going to learn how to deal with wet branches later. But for right now, try to use dry branches if you can. And if you're car camping, to prevent bringing in unwanted pests, be sure that you're sourcing your wood locally, either from the ground around your campfire or buy it from a local store so you don't have any hitchhiking pests that you brought from home. We've had some terrible problems throughout the country, and in fact the world, of pests inadvertently going into forests where they have no natural predators and they're wiping out some trees like the hemlocks in my area. You want to collect enough firewood to keep your fire going for as long as you're going to need it, whether it's an hour or 2 hours or through the night. Softwoods like pine burn very quickly, so if you need your fire to keep you warm all night, you want to seek out hardwoods like oak. You've collected all your wood. Now we got to figure out how are we going to ignite this thing. You're going to need something to start the fire. Options include a cigarette or stick lighter, matches, and preferably here use waterproof, or flint. Well, you can also use the friction. Remember, you learned when you were a kid how you can take a stick and run it back and forth between your hands and get a little smoke out of a rock. That's possible. I've never personally been able to pull it off, so I'm not recommending that, but you can always toy around with that. But with so many easy options out there, just bring a cigarette lighter, a stick lighter, or some matches. If I'm car camping, those barbecue gas sticks are really nice because you can keep the flame away from you and poke the fire in different areas. But if I'm backpacking where space and weight is a premium, I use a little baby mini cigarette lighter, and I bring some birthday candles. It makes it easy to light one of these and use it as a nice long flame to start up the tinder in multiple places. And always, and I caution you to always bring, because fire is so important, always bring a backup fire starter. My personal go-to is I take dryer lint and I wad that up and mix it with petroleum jelly in a small zip bag, and it works great, lights long, and it's a perfect fire starter. I also bring waterproof matches, and you could also bring a fire stick. A fire stick is a man-made little mini log that ignites pretty quickly. They're about 4 inches long and fairly cheap. But like I said, my go-to is the dryer lint and petroleum jelly. I would always keep the dryer lint and Vaseline in your emergency kit in your backpack at all times anyway, so you always have a way to start a fire. So the next thing, you've collected all your materials. Where do you actually build the campfire? And let's back up just a minute first. Before you go into the woods, you need to check with the rangers and find out what the rules are. Are you even allowed to have a campfire? If so, are you required to use established rings? What are the rules about picking up the sticks? Do you need a permit? So find out all that ahead of time. Ask too, what are the forecasts? Are they expecting high winds and any other weather issues that you need to be aware of? We don't want to be responsible for starting a wildfire. We've seen the devastation that's happened out west in the last couple of years. It's horrible. So whenever possible too, we want to practice leave no trace. So what does that mean? That means using existing fire rings or a previous campfire spot rather than building a new one. So at your campsite, if you see an existing fire ring, use that first. If not, you can build your own. When choosing your location, be sure to look up because you want to make sure you're not going to catch the trees above you on fire as well. So you want it clear not just around your fire, but above your fire. So to build your campfire, you want to get down to the bare dirt. Ideally, you want no vegetation about 8 to 10 feet from the fire. And so if you clear away some dirt, leave that by the fire so that way if you have to put it out quickly, you can douse it with the dirt. It's a good idea too also to have water, the dirt, and a shovel or a trowel nearby the fire, again, in case you have to douse it quickly. I saw a billboard near my house, the Forestry Service put out, saying that embers can travel as far as a mile. Think about that. So you need to be really, really cautious about your fire. You don't want to build a massive bonfire with tons of little embers floating up in the air. It's very pretty, but it's also very dangerous. So keep your fire down low and under control. All right, we've got our supplies. We've got our location. Now how the heck are we going to build this thing? There are several methods you can consider. So you want to pick the one that you either like or works best for your situation. The one I usually build is a teepee fire. And it looks just like the name sounds. You're going to make a pile of your tinder and kindling. And then over that, you're going to make a little teepee with your firewood. So that way, as the tinder and kindling catches fire, it then travels up and catches your teepee logs, and thus you've got a nice little fire. Next one, let's say you've got a slight breeze. Not real windy because you don't want to be having a fire if it's real windy. But if you've got a slight breeze, you might want to consider doing a lean-to fire. And this one, you can either take a stick that's a few inches in diameter, and you're going to use that as a spine. So you're going to shove part of that into the ground so that it stands up at like a 30-degree angle facing upward into the wind. Or you can also rest it on a large rock or a big log. And then under your spine, you put your tinder and your kindling. And then on the sides of the spine, you're going to lay your other firewood, allowing for air, because you always want to have air circulation. And then that way, as the tinder and kindling catches fire, then it lights both sides of your lean-to. Another option is called a crisscross fire. And for this, you're going to take 2 fire logs about the width of your planned fire, lie those on the ground, and then add 2 more on the inside that you put your tinder and your kindling, and then add 2 more logs on top of your initial ones going the opposite direction. So you're making like a box shape. And you keep stacking, alternating which side, and you build up so it's almost like a little log cabin. You've got your supplies, you've built your structure, now it's time to light it. Using one of the fire starter methods I mentioned earlier, you want to light your tinder in several places. Sometimes you're going to need to blow on it to help keep it going. It's always important to keep plenty of air in your fire. So if you put your firewood too close to each other, take a stick and let in some more air. And reminder too, you don't want that really tall fire. You just want to keep it under control. So don't load too many things on top of it so that you have the sparks and the embers floating in the air. And also I want to caution you too, while it's tempting, don't use charcoal, lighter fluid, or gasoline to start your fire. It's super dangerous. You want to plan to add more firewood about every 45 minutes or so to keep your fire going. And stoke the fire periodically with a long stick. You want to push the embers to the surface, and you want to expose new wood to the flame. Your goal is to create embers. That's what keeps things going. When it's time to put it out, and also I want to caution too, you never want to leave a fire unattended. So before you move on, you want to make sure your fire is completely out. And I would caution you to sprinkle it with water rather than dousing it. You'll make things a lot easier for the next camper if you didn't saturate the fire site. You can use dirt, you can sprinkle with water, you can just let it burn out on its own and just keep sticking, not adding more fuel to the fire. To check to make sure it's out, place your hand over the fire. Do you feel any heat at all? Stir up your coals and check again. Make sure it's completely out. And if you ended up building a fire ring or otherwise disturbing the area, you want to try to put things back the way that you found them. Okay, now here's the biggie. How do we start a fire when it's wet or damp outside? It's challenging, but it's not impossible to get a fire going even when it's wet. Here's how you do it. You're going to have to find a location out of the rain. All right, this could be a cave. It could be under a large fallen tree. It could be under a dense canopy, somewhat protected from the rain. You might have to build something with a tarp, but you've got to find some way to shelter yourself and the fire. If the rain's passed, you can build wherever you want to, but you're still going to have to deal with finding some dry material to get the fire going. So let's say you're hiking, you know it's raining, you know you're going to build a fire. Be on the lookout for good tinder and start collecting it along the way. You're going to be really glad that you did. It's doable, but it's difficult and time consuming. If all the wood on the ground is soaked, look up instead of down for dead branches that might be caught in the trees. Often they're going to be dry on the inside, even if the bark is wet on the outside. And if you're in an emergency situation where you must build a fire, even though you can't do this normally, but if this is a life or death situation, you can push over a dead tree. And you're often going to find that the root core is still dry and it's filled with turpentine. So you're going to have easy to ignite material. You can also make larger kindling by taking a 4 or 5 inch branch and using that as a hammer, and use that with your knife to cut off the fat wood inside of a branch. You're going to need a lot more kindling and tinder, so you're going to have to collect accordingly. Look for things like the dry grasses and thistles. Those seed heads often can repel out of the water and can be great fire starters. Pine resin and sap is also a great resource because it catches fire instantly. So look under your dense canopies and other protected areas and try to pick up some supplies there. If you can't find enough tinder, you can peel the bark off a dead branch and then use your knife to make shavings. This is really tedious, but it's effective. To build your fire, you want to make a hardwood platform over the damp soil. And then, because you want to get everything up off the ground, and then add your tinder and kindling, and then your firewood. Use the perimeter of the platform to put wet logs and that'll help them dry out as the fire burns, and then you'll be able to add them later. Your goal here is to try to evaporate as much of the moisture as possible from those bigger logs that you're going to be using later. And you're going to have to keep adding more small sticks to keep rekindling this fire as needed to keep the embers going. You're also going to want to make a shelter for all your materials you've collected to keep them out of the elements if it's still raining so they don't get wetter. So we're going to try to dry out as much as we can. And while backpackers generally don't have this luxury, if you're car camping, pack along a shovel, a hatchet, a good knife, and a folding saw. If you're lucky enough to have these tools, you can find a down dead tree and look for branches about the width of your arm. Cut it off and then hold that cut end to your cheek. If it feels dry on the inside, it's going to be good to burn. If it feels wet, discard it, or if it smells rank, discard it. You're going to take your branch you just sawed and cut it into 12-inch logs, remove the bark, and then split each into kindling. You can take your hatchet here and use that as a splitting wedge. Put the hatchet where you want to split the log, and then have a friend, if you're lucky enough to be with a friend. Otherwise, you'll have to finagle this yourself. Take the log and pound it like a hammer over your hatchet. You can also make shavings for tinder with your knife. So like I said, all of this is very tedious and time consuming, but if you must start a fire when it's damp, this is how you do it. Knowing how to build a campfire is one of the most critical outdoor skills you can learn. I would recommend that you practice at home before you go out into the wild, so you'll have the confidence and skills for the next time you need to build a campfire, even if it's damp. I hope you found some tips helpful today. If you have any other great suggestions, please pass them along. You can always reach me at kit@activetraveladventures.com. And speaking of active travel adventures, next week on the show, we are doing part 2 of our Bolivia adventure. It's one of my favorite interviews. I hope you'll check that out. Again, I apologize for the nasally nose, and I hope you'll bear with me, and I'm sure I'll be fine next time. Until next time, this is Kit Parks. Adventure on.